Hey. This episode, I want to be a continuing story, or part 2, if you will, of the episode I did a few years ago that I had called Postpartum Name Depression / Name Remorse / Name Regret. And there wasn't anybody really talking about this at the time. And it was something that I was starting to interface with more and more and more. And I've had so many women reach out to me and say, thank you so much for that episode. I don't feel alone, and I really needed that. Which I just am like, so thankful. But I wanted to continue that story because since then, it's been a few years and I've learned so much more. I've gotten the opportunity to talk to so many different women. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to these brave women who came forward to talk to me because I've learned so much more about it and found some tips and tricks. And so the first thing that I want to do in this episode is read an excerpt from my book, All Good Names Bring Peace, which is the first ever book about name regret. And it's not going to be the best book about name regret. I can't wait to see the resources that other people come up with, but it's what I have found to be helpful for right now. And so we're here, and I know that this story will progress, but I want to share with you what I've learned to help more people. So let me read you this quick excerpt. The process of naming should lead you into clarity, not confusion. It becomes a bucket that either nourishes the family vision or drowns you in a toxic thought cycle. If you think this baby naming process won't affect your mental health and that you're alone in this feeling of going crazy, it's time to think again. So you've named a baby. Is name regret even real? In all of the years I have been doing this absolutely wild, wonderful, fun, sacred, unique gig, I've interfaced with so many varying scenarios and mostly humans. What started out as a love of names quickly turned into me standing in secret rooms helping women name miscarried babies. The gravity of this has not escaped me. And so when I began to hear the cry of women mourning the loss of themselves as well, I knew I was called to do something about it. I lay awake at night contemplating if decaf coffee is even real, and when in life I should give up the self-control of keeping my French press in the kitchen and not on my nightstand. But one thing I do know is 100% real is that the state of your mental health follows you into every decision-making process. So, is having regret sneak up on you in the naming process weird / unique to you? Definitely not. So here we are. Maybe you're desperate or just curious, but either way, I have learned a few things with what I also call postpartum name depression that I would love to share with you. Tools / thoughts / tricks to help you get to the other side of a predicament that is completely normal and quite common, actually. The foundation layer this book is built on is a truth I have discovered. It's hard to make decisions with clarity when you have a troubled heart / mind, and healing your trauma will heal your life. The magical answer, yes, it's you. I came for the names and stayed for the mothers. This is such an important and needed thing to talk about. I don't think enough people are talking about it. And I think it's important to talk about it correctly. It's such a tender topic. It is about mental health. Don't think for a second that it's not about mental health. It completely is about mental health because it's so closely in tandem with the postpartum period. And when you are postpartum, life feels absolutely insane. I think the women that get the absolutely amazing oxytocin glow where life is great, I'm really excited for you. But I think that's rare. And I'm sure that there is a secret sauce to making that less rare. But my experience, it was hard. And it's hard for so many women. And that's not a critique to if you have an amazing time. I genuinely am happy for you. But I think it's more common to have it not be a good time. Like, you have this baby, and that's amazing. But life also super sucks during that time. You're healing. You're not getting sleep. It's insane. It's an insane time. Your soul is being stretched to max capacity. And you're like, you know what I'd love right now? An emotional episiotomy. I put together a book about name regret, laying out all the things I think people that lead people there and how to get out of it in a really in-depth way. I tried to make it as helpful as I absolutely could. So I don't want to take this podcast episode to just tell you what I already have in the book. If you're suffering from postpartum name depression, please go get the book. I hope that it will help you climb out of that pit of despair. As Anne Shirley would say, the depths of despair. But to highlight postpartum name depression, there are a couple things that lead you there. When you hate all the names, you just can't seem to find a name, you and your partner can't agree, you have different tastes, different styles, one or both don't want to be a part of the conversation, don't take it seriously, just want it to be over with, and then there's absolutely no joy. That's a really hard situation to be in. You want your partner to be jazzed about the conversation, or at least take it seriously, and it's hard when it feels flippant and you're hearing no all the time. No cannot be a part of that conversation. It has to be, that's not my preference, and you talk it out. Abby Sandell said something so amazing in my conversation with her about starting the name conversation off talking about your own names. How do you like your name? What's important to you? And then segueing into a talk about your baby's name. And then it's such an amazing moment to build that relationship of getting to know each other more and problem solving together. It's hard when one person feels like they're carrying all the weight of finding a name and the other person just keeps saying no. Like, that's very discouraging. When another way that people get to name regret is when one of them says, most of the time it's the woman that says, I'm just going to keep the peace, I'm just going to go with it. And then you lay awake at night, haunted, feeling like you made a mistake because the name has become a person. And so you're feeling this loss and you're struggling with that, right? Another way you can get to name regret is FOMO. Endless possibilities. You found a name, you like it, but you didn't feel tingly. And when you came to that decision, so you're wondering, like, because it wasn't love at first sight, is it even real? And you're just like, what if I decide on this name and then in a year I hear the name, right? And I think that you just have to find closure in that you are only able to make the decisions with the information you're equipped with right now. And you can only make a decision with who you are in this season. There is no future season. You have to reconcile within yourself that what's meant to be will meant to be. And you don't know the future. So you just make the best possible decision now, and then you just live it. You just live it out. What else can you possibly do? Lay awake at night for 10 years waiting for the name? What if it never comes? That's really difficult. So you've got to give yourself the permission to say, I'm equipped right now. I'm equipped right now. Future me is future me. But the present me is pretty good. And it just is. And which leads to another thing of the name regret recipe is when you just haven't had that aha moment. When there has to be a balance of heart and head. Like, you want your heart to be in it. Nobody wants to make a decision as special as that with your heart not in it. But you can't lead with your heart either. You have to lead with your head. And so if you've fallen out of love with names, if you hate all of the names, you have to be rational about it. And then also take the pressure off of yourself that if you can't handle being the sole decision maker, then you have to give space for other people or your partner specifically. If you don't have a partner, somebody you trust, to help you in that process so that you don't feel alone. I am a namer. I could name 1,000 babies like that. But I've named 3 of my own, and I understand that pressure. And as somebody who is a namer in this name community, I know what a big decision that is. I know how tricky that can be, and you don't want to be alone in that decision. So if you are saddling yourself with this idea of responsibility that you have to find it, that's a lonely place. And it's a really frustrating place. Straight up. It's a frustrating place to be. So you've got to find a way to, and this is a healthy relationship, to make your partner feel respected and make sure that you feel respected. And you can't just say, oh, I don't think that they care, or they just don't want to be a part of it, so I have to get closure. Like, no. This baby's bigger than you. You're a part of the process, but you are not the process. You're a part of the process. This baby is not you. So you enter into this decision with an abundance of love to make this baby, this person, feel like you named them with dignity. But you've got to let yourself off the hook that you are God Almighty in control of everything, because you will always feel like you have failed. Because that's an insane responsibility to put on yourself. You have to find the person you trust. And if you don't feel like you can trust your partner, you've got to talk to them about that. You can't say, whatever. You have to be able to go to them. And if you can't, you need to go to a marriage counselor and talk it out. Because it's really important. You can't just not have that conversation because it's difficult. The thing that I have discovered, the major takeaway that I shared in the beginning when I read the excerpt from my book that I want to reiterate now, is that your mental health follows you into every decision that you make. So if you're not mentally healthy or mentally strung out, how are you ever going to find peace in a decision? It's rarely about the baby name. Name regret is rarely about the baby name. I'll say it again. Name regret is rarely about the baby name. It's when there's, for some reason, the natural process of problem solving has been compromised. There's a root problem that got you here, but there's a baby name bucket and then the other mental health bucket, and that spills over into the baby name bucket. But if you're like, I can't find this baby name, I have name regret, a question to ask yourself is, how did I get here? Like literally, how did I get here? Well, it's been multiple steps. Step 1, where were you and your partner at? What was happening in your life? Was there trauma? Were there unforeseen circumstances? Did you feel bullied or pressured or ignored? Where was everything at? That led you here. It's rarely about the name. It's about everything that led you into that. When you can get all of that sorted out, it's so much easier to find peace in the baby naming decision. I'm so passionate about this because I've seen so many broken, sad women in this process. And the secret sauce is you. The secret to the formula is you. You have to get your mental health in order. It's impossible for you to make a decision for peace when you are mentally strung out. So find a way to get yourself whole and then deal with the decision making like you would about a new job or a relationship or family drama or where you want to live or the kind of car you want. All of those things. That's how you have to look at the naming process. If you have a name or a couple names written on paper, you can look at that and say, there's no wrong decision because we've weeded all of these down to these names, so any name is a good name. We just have to find the name that we're at peace with. Because sometimes, most of the time, in name regret, but sometimes in just the baby naming process in general, most of the time in name regret, love comes later. And I talked about this with Abby Sandell from Appalachian Mountain. That conversation was so brilliant, and I'll think about that for the rest of my life. But we talked about grieving after you've made a name decision. That peace and closure and grieving walk side by side. So you can't expect euphoria when you've made a decision. That is going to come much later. You're grieving the process. It was a lot. You're grieving everything. You're having to unpack everything. Let your cortisol come down. Let your anxiety come down. All of the things that you've been keeping inside. It's going to take some time. It's going to take some time to walk it out in peace. And you might say, I'm indifferent to the name my child has. Well, children have a really special gift that their name becomes them. And so when they're 5 and when they're 10, you're going to look at them and go, oh my gosh, I love you. And you're going to think about the distant memory of when you struggled with their name, and it's just going to be past drama you had to go through. It'll be a part of your story, but it's not their story. They're not going to come to you at 10 or 20 and say, you made a huge mistake. And if they do, they're children. And you can say, hey, and have a moment where you're teaching them emotional intelligence and saying, I did the best I could. Let's walk through this together, shall we? What else could you possibly do? But this name process is your story, not their story. And you're going to make the best decision you can. That's all you can possibly do. I almost said another thing that's too much baking powder in the name regret recipe, but then I was like, Alex, are you still thinking about that plum cobbler you made yesterday? Maybe. Expectation pressures. Whether you have family or a mother-in-law or a father-in-law or a grandmother telling you have to pass on this tradition, or somebody else saying you can't use that name, it's my name. There are so many different dramas that can be happening, and that pressure could make you second guess yourself. I think what is so helpful in this process is when you third person yourself in it, where you say, okay, these are the scenarios and the situations. How do I walk that out while still following my instincts? Don't talk yourself out of your instincts, but don't just let your feelings bowl everything over either. They have to be a beautiful blend of both, right? When I was taking notes about what I wanted to say in this episode, I had to take notes. I have notes on my phone. I have notes on a notepad because I'm a mom and I don't get sleep. And so if I don't write it down, I will forget. Even when I tell myself, oh, you won't forget, I will. And so when I was writing these notes down, I had this idea, and then I was like, I don't know that I should actually share that. I've been going back and forth, and I'm like, you know what? It's real. So I'm going to go for it. But the example that came to me in the night that I scribbled down on my notepad is I had written, life's a litter box. And it gets full of poop, right? And in your normal life, there are lots of things that use that litter box, and you're able to stay on top of it. When you have a baby, the litter box sits. So all of the poop that you have been dealing with piles up. It becomes abundantly clear what creatures go in there and poop. It's just everywhere. It is a poop storm, okay? And you don't have the strength to deal with it. You could look at that and be super overwhelmed. Let yourself feel buried. Or you can use that as an identifier of, how did we get here? Who's causing the most poop? Should they even be in that litter box? What relatives are outside cats? What kind of a partner am I? What kind of a partner is my partner? And just recognizing it's postpartum. There's poop. There's just poop everywhere, and it's going to be that way for a while. It doesn't mean that you failed. It's completely normal. You are not the same person making a decision you were before you got pregnant, before you went through labor. You're a different person. And you can't make decisions without addressing the poop. I know this sounds so dumb, and you're like, Alex, please stop saying poop. But I'm serious. When I had my first baby, I had never heard of postpartum anxiety. I'd heard of postpartum depression, so I was armed, ready for it, and I never got it. But I could not let anybody hold Judah and leave the room. I would get in the shower and cry every single day. I couldn't sleep at night because I was afraid of what might happen. And I just dealt with that silently. And people were like, you need to relax. And I was like, I can't relax. And you telling me to relax is not helping me relax because I feel like you're not taking me seriously, which is making me more afraid. When I was pregnant with Reagan, this absolutely lovely person, an angel sent from heaven on Instagram, Tiffany from Beast and Family Vibes, I think that's her account. She did a video for like a mother channel or something that I was following at the time because I hadn't followed her before. And she talked about her postpartum anxiety, and I was like, what? What is this? I've never heard of this before. And she was describing all of the things that I was going through. And I was like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Didn't realize that I had that. So when the third one was coming, Josiah and I literally went and got Post-it notes. And we wrote, the first 2 weeks are hell. It's going to be okay. And we put them on the kitchen cabinet. We put them on the bathroom mirror. Because before you have the baby, you're of sound mind. You've got it. You're mostly slept. When the baby comes, you're like, the past you is like this person you used to know. And you're so primal. And you're like, this is crazy and it's never going to get better. And what have I done? But past us, put those notes there and we'd say, they're right. The first 2 weeks are hard. We just have to get through the first 2 weeks. And then sure enough, the curtain lifts and you start figuring it out and you begin navigating it. But postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression, postpartum exhaustion, postpartum what the heck am I doing is normal. That's completely normal. That's common. Everybody goes through that. Like, you've had a baby. That's a really big, important deal. And it's changed everything. And it's beautiful. Your baby's here and it's beautiful. Like, you look at them and you're like, you're perfect. I can't imagine my life without you. But your body also feels so incredibly broken. And so you have all of these conflicting feelings, like the full spectrum of emotion is happening. You're super sensitive, you're super touched out, you don't know what you're doing, you're trying to figure it out, you're trying to figure out the new rhythm. You and your partner are now at each other's throats because you're underslept, and the whole thing, the litter box is getting more, the life litter box is getting more and more full of poop, and you're like, what is happening? Oh, and now I regret my baby's name. So you can see that, like, it's been a whole process to get to that place. You didn't just suddenly wake up and go, I think I made a mistake with the name I named my baby. You have to unpack everything and then get to the baby name. You can't solve the baby name first. That has to come after getting sleep, taking care of your body, giving yourself the grace of your body being broken and knowing that that's normal, and loving yourself through that process, asking other people to come in and love you through that process, setting boundaries with toxic people, recognizing that you and your partner are both exhausted. Both of your lives have changed. To give each other the grace of that. And go talk to someone together. Give yourself the grace of this moment. Then get to the place of neutrality to make a decision. And if you are someone that is feeling immense anger for the situation that you've been put in, I totally understand that. But you have to address the anger. And you really need to do that in as healthy of a way as possible. And identify the communication style with your partner, how you can talk to them, if you should talk to them with a therapist, do you feel safe, all of the things. And just say, hey, I'm here and I'm angry with you, and I don't want to be, but I need to talk this out with you. I feel like you dropped the ball. I feel like you didn't have my back. I feel like you're not taking this seriously. I feel like you're making me feel like I'm a crazy person. And I just want to feel like you are acknowledging the things in my heart. And I want to acknowledge the things in your heart. But this is an important moment that we have to navigate. And then give them the space to say their frustrations and say, okay, we're both angry, we're both frustrated, but now how do we get out of this? What's the compromise? And making a decision together. And most of the time, I think what that's going to look like is you both conceding halfway. I don't see, if the wife gets to completely name the baby, but the husband had wanted a certain thing, or a certain name, or a certain family tradition, then he's gaining slighted, and vice versa. The reality is that this baby is bigger than the both of you. Both of you are complementing this baby. This baby has their own story. You guys are just a part of it for a little while. So you need to come together and say, what are we actually feeling? What's actually important? And try to, as peacefully as you can, without letting emotions build and build and build till you explode, what does that look like? And if you are in a relationship where your spouse is super combative, dismissive, and is making you feel crazy, that's not okay. And that means that this conversation has to be had with a professional. The whole relationship has to be talked about with the communication. It's not about the name. It is about communication breakdown. That has to be addressed first. Then you can get to the name. But if you are in a marriage and your partner is telling you this is your fault, both of you need to go to a professional. Or you go to a professional by yourself, even if that partner doesn't want to go, and talk about it with a professional marriage counselor. Not just a therapist, a professional marriage counselor, somebody who can help you through this communication breakdown and tell you, I actually think that you're being really uptight about this, or yeah, you're in a really unhealthy relationship. It's hardly ever about the name. It is about communication breakdown, a breakdown in problem solving. And if this relationship's really important to you, then you need to make them feel really important. Our feelings are important, but so are they. And that's where this complicated blend has to work itself out. And I've seen this so many times. I've been in conversations where it's like I can just tell right away that partner is super toxic and not nice. And then I've seen other situations where it's like, I think you're just super hung up on this decision. And I think you have to give yourself some space and some room to have input. And I've seen other situations where it's like, you guys are just exhausted and there's been a misunderstanding, and you just need a couple good nights sleep and to start again. You can't rehash. You just have to identify the problem and try to move forward. Name regret is real, but it's rarely about the name. If you're suffering with name regret, I highly recommend All Good Names Bring Peace. It's all of the things that I've learned so far about name regret and how to get out of it. And I genuinely hope that it helps people. Genuinely. Like, I wrote it for you. I think we're in such an important moment, not only in the name worldosphere, but just globally in general. Because this phenomenon is happening all across the world. I've talked to so many different women from so many different places. A shift is happening. I think post-pandemic, the shift has been magnified. This is a really important conversation to have, and I think more women need to talk about how they've struggled with it, to normalize it, because I keep hearing women tell me that they think they're alone, and you're not alone. You're not alone. Love you bunches. You've got this. Get some sleep.